And joining us now to talk more about the conference today and the future of the conservative movement is Dr. Wendy Patrick, a political and legal analyst. Dr. Patrick, thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Rudy Bay. Thanks for having me.
So first, I just want to get your reaction to the former president's speech. It was his first public appearance since leaving office. He spent a great deal of time attacking his successor. He also hinted at a possible future run for office. What do you make about all of it?
And I will talk about what he said, but I first want to talk about how he looked. He was tanned, toned, and tempered in his remarks. It looks like perhaps maybe for the first time in his life, he actually took a little bit of a break to relax over the last month. Remember, he's only been out of the White House for 6 months. But what did he say? He said a lot, but he stayed on message. And part of that was disappointing to some of his fans, but refreshing to others. He talked about the past, he talked about the future, and as you mentioned, he did tease, without flat out saying it, that he might be considering a 2024 run. But let me toss something into the mix. So the ex-president, President Trump, is now 74. He'll be 75 in June, which makes him 78 in 2024, which, by the way, is how old President Biden is today. So that's a long way away. And that has some people talking about, yeah, it was a great speech. It was very energizing, inspiring, encouraging. But was it for his benefit or for the benefit of other potential up-and-comers?
Including possibly his family members, right?
That's exactly right. His family members have always been invested in his campaign. They've been touted as the future of the party. Now they're not as popular as President Trump was, but who's to say that between now and 2024 a lot could happen, and he may have been intentionally vague as to exactly who he's going to back in the next presidential race.
Well, he did say he's not interested in starting a new party. So is he right to think that the Republican Party is now the party of Trump, united around him, or is he dividing the party?
Well, what a great question. And part of his mission today was to attempt to unite the party. Because over the last month, you've seen an intentional division by some of the members that have distanced themselves very intentionally from him since the beginning of January. But you saw some of them coming back around to try to explain the Republican Party is more than one person. It's not just a personality. We have united policies. And they tried to do that over the course of the last couple of days. But I have to tell you, Rudy Bay, it really seemed like many of the other speakers were just warm-up acts, even though they, in and of themselves, seem to be potential hopefuls for the future. Everybody seemed to try to unite the party. And could President Trump do it by what he said today? At the very least, it was a step in the right direction.
All right, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the impeachment, because it was designed in part to prevent him from running again. Did it actually have the opposite effect by strengthening his base and making the process seem like he was being unfairly persecuted?
Well, let me answer that two ways. Yes and no. That's a typical lawyer answer, right? But let me explain what I mean. It divided Republicans within Congress and their supporters, because you had a couple of Republicans, actually more than a couple, breaking and voting for impeachment. But it united the party in the sense that they saw this for what it was, many of them, and they claimed, some of the Republicans, that this was just a practical way of ensuring that he doesn't have a chance of winning in 2024. No one thought that they were actually going to convict President Trump the second time around of the crimes that he was charged with. So in a sense, that is not very uniting, but it could be, given if you turn it to the fact that the party has to, in and of itself, come together in order to have a chance in 2024. So that's what I mean by it sort of worked both ways. But I think after the last 4 days and the president's speech today, it probably had more of a uniting effect in the long run.
All right, there are so many more questions I'd love to ask you, but we are out of time, unfortunately. Dr. Patrick, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.